He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the vice commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
To summarize maybe the woke mind virus, it consists of creating very, very divisive identity politics. So it actually amplifies racism, amplifies, frankly, sexism, and all the isms. And while claiming to do the opposite, it actually divides people and makes them sort of hate each other, and it makes people hate themselves. And it's also anti-meritocratic. It's not merit-based. So you want to have people succeed based on how hard they work and the talents, not who they are, whether they're man, woman, what race or gender. It's an artificial, mental civil war that is created, and it's not. And let me tell you, it's no fun. Okay, it is like woke mind virus and fun are incompatible. There's no fun in that. No joy. Woke mind virus is all about condemning people instead of celebrating people. Like when in the woke, it just doesn't celebrate. It's all about condemning and being divisive and being I think it's just evil, frankly.
Treating the woke mind viruses. Welcome to Truth Thursday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube. Our X Spaces simulcast is here. Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, Apple TV now, and Roku. Well, something's very wrong with our world. What I'm about to read to you is from today's book discussion. Something is very wrong with our world. Drag King story hours, trans child genital mutilation, soaring inflation, biolab released pandemics, experimental drugs forced on the public, toxic food, a national health crisis, endless wars, open borders, rising crime, election manipulation, the infringing of rights, and relentless lies from the media and the government. That's right, folks. Something is wrong, and it's being coordinated. This dangerous conflict is reaching a boiling point in the West. And now that Donald Trump is president again, the war to end this craziness is all out. Author T.S. Dixon is my guest today to discuss the mind viruses afflicting America. Those words I started my monologue with were his from his new book. He's an American husband, a father, a businessman living in Southwest Florida. And after witnessing this weaponization of government and the justice system against Trump and the conservative movement, Dixon decided he had to do more to get involved. And he released this debut book, The Woke Mind Viruses: Wokeism, Liberalism, Leftism, Globalism. The mind plagues destroying Western civilization and how to stop them, just this year. Well, T.S., welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Rob, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. I love the book. I didn't get a chance to read all of it, but man, the pieces that I read, I'm like, why don't I know about this book? Because you're on the target. Thank you. I have to ask you the standard question, though. Yes. Why did you decide to write this?
Well, I've been politically active for 20 years as a conservative, and I'm an avid researcher. I've been researching for over 2 decades. And I had a pulse on this story, and I didn't see anyone putting it out anywhere. And actually, when I'd see big interviews with big, well-known people, they were asking questions about why. They were confused. Why are these groups doing the things they're doing? It doesn't seem to make any logical sense. And I just was screaming at the television or at the phone, it's ideological. It's ideological. We have to understand the ideology. But what pushed me over the edge was seeing the weaponization of government against Trump's candidacy in the 24 election. And then my wife became pregnant with our first child, and that really pushed me over the edge. I said, I've got to get involved. I've got to do more. I've got to get this story out because I need to empower and equip our movement so that we know who we're up against and how to fight them and how to win.
Exactly. Who we're up against, how to fight them, and how to win. That's what I like about the book. And I like where you started with ideology, because we're in an all-out ideological war, aren't we?
We are. Absolutely. In our time period, ideology is everything. And most people don't really understand what an ideology is. You don't often hear it articulated. And so I try to give my definition in the book that it's a set of ideas, a collection of beliefs that creates a view of the world and declares a mission. And most ideologies are fine, like constitutionalism or capitalism, Christianity, Judaism. These are great ideologies that have helped build the West. But there's also the other dark side of ideology where you have evil ideologies that want tyrannical power, want to take over at any cost, might makes right, brutality, like communism, like Nazism, fascism. These are terrible ideologies that are more like societal sicknesses or illnesses or cancers on nations that lead to a high body count. And so that's, what the book is about. There's 4 such dangerous illnesses that we're battling with now in our era. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to expose them so that we could be cured of them.
Yeah, exactly. And when you started out, you laid out an anecdote about a charismatic leader, and it's Alexander the Great. But what I want people to understand is that we just said that we're in an ideological war. But that story you tell about Alexander the Great and Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and the Hellenic ideology really is about the ideology of democracies and republics, isn't it?
It is. The thinking behind our modern systems of government go all the way back to that time period. And what I'm doing there is showing just how just look, the entire modern world is structured and based on just a few ideas from some toga-wearing, archaic, ancient Greek philosophers from roughly 2,300 years ago. Just think about how powerful those ideas are because they were true. And we exemplify them today because of that. Now, what I'm doing there in the beginning of the book is I'm giving people a pattern for how ideologies sweep into a nation and change society. So you have usually 4 people. You have usually 2 or 3 intellectual fathers that come up with the ideas and write them in books. And then there's always this 4th character, this charismatic leader. I call them the spiritual father of the ideology. And they're the one that come into power, bring the ideology and mass popularize it across the country. And so in the ancient world, Alexander the Great is a perfect example. His teacher was Aristotle, whose teacher was Plato, and above him was Socrates. They came up with the ideas, wrote them in books, and then Alexander swept across the ancient world and brought their ideas to the entire ancient world, including Judea, and they had their language of the Greek language. And so that's why even the New Testament was written in Greek and not Hebrew, because of Alexander and this movement. That's the power of ideology.
Yeah. I mean, even the story of Jesus Christ, the ideology that was built in the Old Testament on the prophecies and then came to fruition through him. You don't even have to have a charismatic leader be walking the earth anymore. He's living, but not walking the earth. And then here we are over 2,000 years later. And that Christian ideology is prevalent, prolific, and being talked about every moment of every day. It's amazing how that works.
Yes.
We keep referring to these, and you titled your book it the mind viruses. We refer to it like it's an illness that spreads rapidly. Why do we do that? Why is society characterizing that way? Because it's not. I mean, Elon Musk wasn't the first one to do it. You aren't. I'm not. Why is it that we do that?
Well, Gad Saad wrote a book, The Parasitic Mind, and he was talking about how ideologies can be behave similar to a virus or like a fungus or an infection. And then Elon picked up on that, and I think he might have coined the term woke mind virus, and it just stuck because it's just such a bullseye statement and the nickname for what we're up against. But viruses are emblematic of sickness, right? There's lots of types of sicknesses, but we really relate. We understand viruses, the cold, the flu, COVID, and what have you. And so they infect the host and they spread disease, and they can even kill people if they're in a weakened state. And so dark ideologies behave almost exactly like a virus. They infect the mind of the consciousness of a group of people or a nation, and they keep going, working to destroy the host and bring about a revolution with a huge body count. And so we fight off and have medicine to fight off diseases because they're lethal. And we should do the same thing politically because these ideologies are even more lethal and have a massive body count. So in a way, it's a perfect metaphor that they are like a virus.
Yeah. The other thing that I noticed that you've done, and I think you're unique in this, is you lay out stages of the virus, almost like stages of cancer. And I think you refer to cancer, the cancer of liberalism, I think, later in the book. But so as a society, I wanted to get your take on this for the audience. We are in this war. We have this mind virus, these multiple mind viruses, the four you lay out, which I totally agree with. I think it's brilliant how you laid that out. But where is our society right now? What stage are we in? And what are those stages?
Well, we are in stage 2, which is destabilization, and leading to stage 3, which is crisis. And so basically it starts off with something called demoralization. That's stage 1. That's where they infect the school systems, the media, the arts, the culture, the government. And demoralization has 2 effects. One, it seeks to completely indoctrinate those that it's seeking to brainwash and create as followers and a power base and radicalize them. And so that's why when you talk to liberals, you talk to people that have bought into the woke nonsense, it doesn't matter how many facts you bring anything because they're so thoroughly indoctrinated, it's become like a religion to them, and they'll just get emotional and upset and even angry or violent if you confront them too vigorously with facts. And we see that all the time on YouTube and whatnot. And then the other group, those that oppose the revolution, the demoralization is meant to just get them to be lazy, give up, inactive, or just give up hope that anything can be done, like feel like everything's hopeless, like many felt before Trump was reelected. During the Biden era, a lot of people, I think, felt hopeless, like nothing could be done. And then in stage 2, destabilization, we're seeing that now with where they had the open borders, the massive crime. You want to have financial turbulence. You want things to get really expensive. You want high taxes. And you just want to soak the middle class forever and steal everything they've got and just start to destabilize everything. That's why they facilitated terror attacks, you name it. I mean, more and more wars, anything to destabilize the foundations of these Western countries. And then finally, it comes to what's a crisis event. And the crisis event can be an invasion. It can be a nuclear explosion. It could be a sudden financial collapse. It could be a mass assassination of a government that's in power. They can down a plane full of the whole government, the leading government officials. There's many ways that they can do the crisis, and then at that point, that's when they come in with their to fill the power vacuum and hopefully have military backing so that they can effectively run their revolution, like we've saw in Cuba, China, Russia, Venezuela, many countries throughout the last 100 years.
Yeah, and it's been going on in this country, this ideological war for over 120 years, really, probably longer than that in my mind. In the next segment, I want to get into how we can recognize that in its cradle, in general sense, so other countries can watch out for it. But then you're going to see, I think, in the opening video of the next segment, it's what this liberalism as a disease kind of looks like. We'll be right back with T.S. Dixon. We're talking about his book, The Woke Mind Viruses.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
I agree with Elon Musk. I believe that liberalism is a mental disease. Now, I get why Democratic politicians and liberal organizations are pushing back on Doge. I understand. It's their foot soldiers, the keyboard warriors, the protesters, the agitators. They're the ones that I'm concerned about. They're not okay. They are lacking serious purpose in their life. And that is why they latch on to all of these different causes du jour. 6 months ago, they wanted to outlaw gas-powered cars and gas stoves. We had to be all electric. We had to save the environment. And now they're burning them down using fossil fuels. That's why they're professional students and they stay in school and incur all of this debt. They're terrified of going out and creating something. It's a safe space, honestly. But they come out and do you know how many death threats I have gotten from liberals simply because they disagree with my ideology? That's not normal. It's not normal to want to tell people to either harm themselves or to threaten them. It wouldn't even cross my mind to do that. I don't know if it's environmental. I don't know if it's consumption of additives or what they're putting in the food, or perhaps maybe even medications that they're taking that's supposed to help mental illness that's making it worse. But there's something going on.
Experts say that Russian hackers found a way to hack our utilities, and the hackers may still be in there waiting.
Talking Truth Thursday today with T.S. Dixon, author of this great new book called The Woke Mind Viruses. And this is a fantastic book, folks. You can find it on Amazon. I highly recommend you go get it because it's the only really book that's brought in the history of these woke mind viruses. And there's 4 of them laid out in the book: wokeism, liberalism, leftism, and globalism. And we're going to touch on each one of those. And what you just heard right there is a pretty good description of the liberalism woke mind virus. And T.S. Dixon is my guest today. And T.S., it really is a disease. And to listen to her talk about the reactions of these liberals, it's interesting because the symptom in those particular circumstances are the people protesting, the keyboard warriors that she talked about. Those are the symptoms. But like a virus, which feeds on certain things in the body, like some viruses like things like sugar, and it allows them to expand and grow in the body and become more and more deadly and those kind of things. The Doge effort has found the food, and that is the illegal funding through these non-government organizations and from U.S. agencies like USAID. That's just one. The USAID scandal, the first one that Musk uncovered. And that's why the left is going nuts over it, isn't it?
Well, yeah, you see, on the left, it's a coalition of these 4 groups. So they each have their own ideology, but they work together as like an army, like a military with a command. And the commanders are the globalists. And they're the ones that have set up all of the pay schemes and scams to siphon tax money out of the American public and then redirect it into financing the woke agenda and the globalist agenda. And so that's the brilliant thing about Elon and Trump is they're identifying it, uncovering it, and then cutting it off, defunding them. And so then what the globalists do is they activate their foot soldiers to go on the attack. And so a lot of the behavior you're seeing where it's coordinated, where they're burning down sites and they have these web pages with Molotov cocktail clickers where you can see where the Tesla owners live or the dealerships are. This is all funded and paid for by the globalist agenda. They use the woke army, the woke radicals, as their foot soldiers, as that TikTok commentator was saying. What a perfect video for this. She is really nailing it. Well said.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought on the question I wanted to ask you, but when we see government instruments as part of this construction, U.S. government instruments, it reminds me that you write about in your book some historical examples of the dark pieces of this and what can happen. Just give us one historical example about how these woke mind viruses out of control go awry, and the end state of that is really horrendous for humankind.
Well, yeah, I mean, this kind of a virus erupted in France in the early 1800s with the French Revolution and the Jacobins, and they were decapitated. Once they take power, then the real violence starts and the real murder, open murder begins. And so all these death threats that they're making now, they make good on them. And they were chopping people's heads off in the town square and in front of churches with guillotines. That's where the guillotine comes from as a symbol. Same thing with the Bolsheviks in Russia in 1917, where they came in and swept in with their revolution, and then the bloodletting began. And they had radical beliefs. I mean, a lot of transsexualism, transgenderism, godlessness, Satanism, all sorts of things happen within these groups and is common. The beautiful thing is, in America and Western countries, we've been able to fend off these earlier prototype versions of this virus. But now this one, it's like woke has been gain of function created and engineered in a lab somewhere, which was Frankfurt, Germany, to attack and effectively destroy the West. And so that's what we're up against. We had a literal virus, and now we're up against a gain of function mind virus.
Yeah, and to watch it, the way the United States government is organized, and our state governments to a degree too, as democratic republics, with this bureaucracy. And this is why I say this has been going on for at least 125 years, might even go back to the 1850s, 60s in this country, is that the bureaucracy, the unelected bureaucracy piece of the federal government especially, has grown extremely powerful. And it's these woke mind viruses that have enabled that over over a century-long period of time, isn't it?
It is. So the origins, the point of, so what I try to do in the book is go back to the point of origin and go to exactly where it comes from, who it came from, and what their goals and beliefs are. And our movement started in 1776, and it was preceded by the Great Awakening, Christian Revival, and then the European Enlightenment, which was the quest for truth, created the sciences, modern education, led to the Industrial Revolution, the modern world. And so everything that we enjoy today came out of that movement. And that's what drives our belief system, which is that there is a creator, that this creator grants us inalienable rights, that truth exists, that the role of government is a limited role, and that we should be able to have free market capitalism. And so that's the fundamental beliefs of our system. That's what we exist to defend and protect for our generation and the next generation. But there was a counter movement to that in the 1800s with the Jacobins and whatnot, but it became an ideology under three men, the intellectual fathers. Darwin, who said there is no God because, we all came out of the ooze and evolved over 100 million years. Nietzsche, who followed him up, that said if there is no God, then there's no afterlife, no morality, no right and wrong, and everything's meaningless, so that all there is will to power. That's all there is, the pursuit of power. And then you were followed up by Marx, who said if that's all true, here's a 10-step program to achieve and fulfill Nietzsche's will to power. It's called the Communist Manifesto, the 10 planks of communism. And that became the birth of the left. And then from that trunk of that tree comes modern leftism, which are socialists and communists, liberals, which is Marxism adapted for an American audience. You have the woke mind virus, woke, which comes out of 1930s Frankfurt, Germany, which is what they call cultural Marxism, where you attack the culture and divide people culturally, like Elon was talking about in that clip, versus not rich versus poor, but black versus white, man versus woman, gays versus straights, transgenders versus males and females, those trying to protect the earth from everybody destroying the earth. And so that's a theory called critical theory that they developed to attack the West and bring in revolution. And then the final one is globalism. And globalism is the least spoken about, least understood, because they're the money power, the financial interest. And they're trying to create a federation of countries under one giant global government, sort of like the 50 states are under the federal government, or the European countries are under the EU Commission. They want one body that all the nations of the world are underneath. Global government. Marxist government. Yep.
You think the United Nations organization is the core of that idea, that they're trying to use that as the instrument to bring that to fruition?
Yes. So this ideology was founded by Cecil Rhodes, who created the De Beers Company in South Africa in the 1880s and 90s. And he was followed up by a guy named Lord Milner, who was then followed up by John D. Rockefeller Jr., who took over the movement. And their goal was to establish a structure and then utilize the power of the United States merged with the UK's in an alliance to eventually bring this about. And so they had stages. They had the first stage where they brought in the Federal Reserve Bank and whatnot, and they had the Bank of England already. And then phase two was after World War II at Bretton Woods, where they brought in the second stage, where they set up the UN, they set up the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, the World Corporation, the World Court, and World Bank, the IMF, all that stuff. And so that is the proto-globalist shadow government. And then the idea was that when the technology was finally ready to go, which you need like massive AI and things, they watched Napoleon try to conquer the world, failed. Hitler tried to conquer the world, failed. So they realized the thing that those guys lacked, that the reason they failed, they didn't have the right technology. And so they set up this interim world government to prep the world, prep the nations, and draw us in slowly through a long march through our institutions, and then eventually collapse this iteration to bring in the final version, their fully realized world government. And that's what they were trying to do in our time.
Yeah, and that's been disrupted a little bit, hasn't it? The pandemic actually, which I believe was one of their operations, looking back now at all the evidence.
Absolutely.
And they're aided and abetted by the bureaucratic establishment that's opposed to America First policy, because they're pro-globalist policy, which is the liberal, what do we call it? The phrase is the rules-based
international order.
International order that the United States and the West created post-World War II. So that crowd is on that side of this thing, and we've disrupted it because we saw what happened in the pandemic. Now, Donald Trump is saying, I'm defunding the WHO. Up until a few minutes ago, he was sending Elise Stefanik, who is a warrior. No matter what you say about her voting in Congress or whatever, she is an American warrior. And I believe that she was going to go rip out the guts of the United Nations to the max extent possible, at a minimum. But he's withdrawn her nomination a few minutes before our show started. And I don't know who he's going to name for that. And we think primarily, and he said it on Truth, primarily because it's so tight in Congress. And he's seeing the globalists pop out. You know, this Signalgate thing with Hegseth, it's an operation. There's no doubt about it. It mirrors the operations that they played against Donald Trump from the time he came down the escalator, when they went after him with the FISA system. They went after General Flynn, the Russia hoax, the suckers and losers hoax. Matter of fact, Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic is the same actor. I call him an actor in the media that pull off all the rest of those. So that's one of their operations. And it's because Donald Trump's able to do these things now, like, well, I'm just going to defund the WHO. And the latest news on that is that they're going to run out of money and have to stand down their operations if something's not done. But that is the fight stage that has been set. And we got to take another break, TS. When we come back, we'll talk more about that. And we'll hear from J.D. Vance about why leftism is a religion. And I want to dive into that a little bit, because this whole religion connection to Marxism and an atheistic ideologies like it is kind of puzzling and interesting to pull apart. We'll be right back with T.S. Dixon, author of The Woke Mind Viruses. You got to go get that book.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Well, you know these signs that are in super woke neighborhoods. I'm sure there's plenty of them in Austin. Like, in this house, we believe science is real. No person is legal. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know your religious background, but like I'm a convert to Catholicism. It's like, was raised Christian, became an atheist, came back to Christianity, got baptized Catholic like 5 or 6 years ago. And what is so interesting about this in this house we believe is it's so similar to the creed that you declare every day at a Catholic Mass, right? We believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God. And there's almost a similar cadence between the Christian creed and what these guys are doing with this hyper woke stuff.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, and it's Truth Thursday, and we're telling the truth. We're telling the truth about the woke mind viruses. That's the name of the book we're discussing today with the author, T.S. Dixon. T.S., before we went to the break, we dove into globalism a little bit. But one of the interesting things to me about leftism and the liberals in America, which really are masked Marxists, in my opinion, and socialists.
Yes, that's what they are.
Is this modeling of Christianity? I mean, I think I'll take it one step further. Modeling of Christianity and our philosophies. He's talked about the Catholic Creed and those kind of things, but you can find elements of that everywhere in this country. And the American Marxists have modeled that. It's supposed to be an atheistic based ideology, but really they make it a religion, don't they?
Well, yeah, I have an entire section of my book about how it is a religion. Marx was not necessarily a political philosopher, but he was an atheistic theologian. And his goal was not to create a new form of government necessarily, but to create a new religion that could save people through changing their human nature. And so that was what he was fascinated with through the tool of communism and socialism. And so what we have today, he taught that the Marxist leaders to teach the people that they could save themselves through good political works instead of good religious works. And so that's the core of Marxism that a lot of people, they're picking up on, but they don't fully understand. And it's much like any religion based on works. Similar to Islam, they have to pray 5 times a day. They have to go on a Hajj to Mecca. They have to bow towards the east, and they have to fast during Ramadan in order to do the good works to make it into paradise. Now, Marxism is just like that. But they have basically 5 major tenets. Social justice, which is like mainly rich versus poor, bringing in socialism for the sake of saving the poor. They have radical feminism, which is where they want to save women from the patriarchy. They have LGBTism, where they want to save children from heterosexuality and from gender normativity, which they believe are social constructs forced on them by their families, their churches, and their society. And they want to save these children from the threat of heterosexuality and gender normativity of being a male or female. They have climate alarmism, where they want to save the earth from carbon dioxide, which is a life-giving molecule. Go figure. And then they have critical race theory and racialism, where they want to save minority groups, save blacks, save immigrant groups from majority groups like whites in the West. And so by doing these things and by supporting these causes, they feel like they are atoning for their sin, making up for their misdeeds in life, and that they are cleansed and washed in the water of their Marxist works, and they are a righteous person. That's why they get this self-righteousness and this moral superiority complex and talk down to others and act so arrogant, and then they virtue signal to each other to let each other know, let us know, hey, I did this. Oh, I know the right things. I know the right phrases. It's like reciting a catechism or reciting their prayers to Mecca. And so that's what they do. And when, instead of wearing a cross, they wear the rainbow flag. That's their symbol. And so, yeah, it is a religion. Absolutely. It was intended to be a religion. That's why it's been so powerful and effective for so many years.
And that's why you mentioned the rainbow flag. That's why you can tell the level of of the infection in our own government, especially at the federal level. I'm a VA patient, a Veterans Affairs Administration, a service-connected disabled veteran, and I go to the local hospital down here, and they usually have 4 American flags all lined up together at the main entrance there. Well, during Pride Month, they put a rainbow flag up. That's the United States federal government putting a symbol of hate from a Christian, but they put a symbol of hate on a flagpole and elevated it to the same level as the Stars and Stripes. That really is religious, isn't it?
It might as well be a biohazard flag, or a white flag of surrender, that, hey, this has been conquered and marked and taken by the globalists, this organization.
Yeah, that flag kept disappearing. I don't know what veterans were taking it down. It kept disappearing. I was hoping that maybe one of them would have a Christian flag, the white flag with the blue Union and the red cross.
Oh, yeah.
They would raise in its place, but that never happened. Although I think it's going away now, and the leftists in the government and liberals in that are embedded in the government still are just going crazy because their religious symbol is no longer allowed to be flown in the faces of people like me and you. Very interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what makes them righteous and holy and elevated with their social consciousness above us unwashed Neanderthals that believe in the Bible and believe in the Constitution and guns and heterosexuality and all of these social constructs and archaic nonsense like creationism or God or the notion of truth, that there's true things and false things in the world.
Or the facts of genetics, right? X and Y chromosomes.
Right, chromosomes.
There are certain facts you don't have to believe what I believe, that God created men and women, which is what it says in the Bible. You don't have to believe that, but you have to go with the science, don't you? Oh, wait a minute. No, you don't. And that was one of the things I wanted to ask you is, if this is a religion, my religion has a heaven, the Muslim religion has paradise. What's the heaven for the Marxists and the atheists and all those folks that are pushing this religion?
So they don't have a spiritual heaven for their soul because they don't believe in the soul. They're secular Darwinists. So their heaven is to bring about revolution on the earth. So if they can bring about a revolution in their country, that is their best chance of getting to heaven, is bringing about a revolution like that in Cuba, China, Russia, Venezuela, Vietnam, North Korea. That's heaven. And then what's interesting is, though, they do have a kingdom. In Christianity, there's a kingdom. There's going to be a second coming of Christ, and he's going to rule for 1,000 years and set up a kingdom. Now, they have this. This is called the end of history. It comes from Marx's professor from Germany, Hegel, and he foretold this end of history when we get to this sort of nirvana-like end of human civilization. And now the technocrats say that that's going to be when we hit the singularity with AI, and they transcend and are, merged with computer systems and whatnot, AI and robotics. So that's their version of the kingdom. But the globalists see the end of history as when they fully rule and become gods themselves. And so they're trying to attain immortality through science, through longevity science and biohacking, and even eventually maybe merging and using technology in their body, nanobots, different things to cure the disease of aging. And so they're trying to achieve eternal life through that vector, through technology, versus what Christians do is through Jesus Christ, through the blood of Jesus, and so the salvation experience.
Yeah. How do they get past the contradictions? And the last segment of this show is partially about that, but I want to get into that a little bit. I was reviewing videos for possible use on the show today and last night, and this one was of a little boy. It's a British demonstration or protest, and it's a little boy. He's probably 8 or 9 years old. His freaky mom is there with her rainbow hair and piercings and tattoos and all that. No offense to anybody like that, but she was freaky left-wise. And he's holding a cardboard sign that says F-U-C-K, the Nazis. And she's railing about the Nazis, and the little kid is railing about the Nazis. And the reporter with the video is trying to ask him a question of, well, you seem to be contradicting, because the lady goes, we're opposed to hate. Aren't you opposed to hate? You have to hate Nazis to be opposed to hate. And the reporter's trying to ask her, well, isn't that contradictory? Aren't you advocating for intolerance and hate and violence against a certain group of people because you disagree with them? And the little boy just went ballistic and started verbalizing what was on his little sign there. And that's one of the things I think that puzzles Americans, us normies, that are on Americanism. That's what we want, is the stuff that comes out of the Declaration and the Constitution and everything, and freedom. It's just puzzling because they seem to live a life of contradiction at every stage.
Yeah. Well, this behavior is also easily observed in cults, right? So the cult leader has their ulterior motive, their ultimate agenda, but that's not the message they give to the cult members and the converts, right? They're just teaching the dogma and the prophecies and the religion to the cult members. And they're letting them know this is the absolute truth. You're the inside group. Everyone else is going to hell, but you guys are the chosen ones. And I'm your leader. I've got the link to the truth. And just listen to everything I say. I mean, that's cult-like thinking. And so that's the only way it works with Marxism and leftism and liberals, woke, is these people have joined in, and these teachers, these philosophers of old, and then the modern leadership, these are their leaders. These guys all have ulterior motives, right? They're trying to fulfill will to power. There's no contradiction with them. They don't actually believe in feminism. They don't believe in helping racial minorities. That's all lies. They don't believe in climate change. They buy mansions on the beach. They fly around in jets to their climate change summits. And I just read they're stripping out and tearing down rainforest for their upcoming one in South America. So they don't really believe this stuff, but it's for the followers. It's for the converts, and cult members don't think beyond whatever's fed to them. Whatever's fed to them from their authority figure goes directly into their subconscious mind. That paints their reality. That's reality. Full stop. They don't think critically. They don't have a critical factor. They're not judging what's being taught to them. They're just accepting it. And so that's why they like to get people as young as possible indoctrinated into the cult through the education system or any other avenue, entertainment, the arts, and they're going after preschoolers, kindergarten, whatever, with the most extreme aspects of their ideology, even transgenderism for 5-year-olds, teaching fisting and homosexuality to these kids, trying to get them exposed to cartoon gay pornography in the school library. I mean, to us, this is really unthinkable. But to them, they've got to get converts as young as possible bought into the cult. And so that's why they can't see the protesters you're mentioning. They're not going to be able to see it. They're totally demoralized. Stage one, demoralization, completely indoctrinated. They couldn't see the truth if you put it right in front of their face. They couldn't see it.
Yeah, and the truth is, like you just mentioned, this is all really about power. It's not about any kind of principle, and we'll continue this discussion after this break. And I want to get you, TS, to dive into what the cure is for this, because there is a way out of this. There is a cure for this stuff, and people need to know about it. And you need to go buy this book, by the way. I've got a hard copy on the way myself, and it's on Amazon, The Woke Mind Virus. It's by T.S. Dixon. We'll be right back on Truth Thursday on the Rob Maness.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
In 1970, the Sydney Morning Herald reported that weather experts fear air pollution, if unchecked, will bring on a new ice age. In 1978, a documentary was made featuring Leonard Nimoy of Star Trek fame, who told viewers during the lifetime of our grandchildren, Arctic cold and perpetual snow could turn most of the inhabitable portions of the planet into a polar desert. In the late 90s and early 2000s, we were being told that humans had punched a hole in the ozone layer and the sun's ultraviolet rays were going to kill us all. Alarmist rhetoric about man-made climate change is nothing new. The United Nations and the media have been pushing it for decades, but over time the narrative has shifted from global cooling to global warming. And in fact, several months ago, Greta Thunberg deleted a tweet from 2018 which read, "A top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years." These prophecies of doom simply never come true. The polar bears are still here, the sea hasn't risen, the ozone layer is fine, but the point of this messaging is to make you afraid. And why? Because if a climate apocalypse is imminent, then governments of the world can centralise their power and control your actions with the so-called emergency. It's a Trojan horse for globalism led by the United Nations and their puppet masters in the Chinese Communist Party. This is not serving Australian interests. These entities are not serving Australian interests. They're trying to control us and they're trying to make us weak, but that is the real emergency.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show on Worldview Tube, and it's Truth Thursday, and we're talking with the author of the book, The Woke Mind Viruses, T.S. Dixon. And T.S., we were speaking on the last segment about this is about power. It's not about Marxism or even capitalism or socialism, liberalism, leftism. This whole effort is about power, and our Australian brother there was talking about the power of governments, and he kind of encapsulated it very well there at the end. That's controlled by the organizations like the United Nations, Health Organization, but is greatly influenced, and he used the word controlled, by the Chinese Communist Party these days. And they do control Tedros and those kind of folks in the World Health Organization. I think that's why the pandemic operation was so successful, because of the influence and control of the Chinese Communist Party on the World Health Organization and the willingness of even the American government to believe what they were saying, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. China has a seat at the table with the globalists, for sure. They coordinate together, run operations together, and they factor into their global matrix and ultimate plan as the Eastern segment of the future world government. So, China eventually wants to rule all of Asia. That's why they have their eyes set on Japan and Taiwan and South Korea.
Yeah, and through their Belt and Road Initiative, they're co-opting developing countries all around the world. So they're extending reach dramatically, and eventually could exercise vaster amounts of controls than just the Pacific Rim. I mean, they're already in the Belt and Road Initiative in most of the island nations, all the way down to Australia. You look at a map, and I saw a map as I was prepping with China flags at every location where they had a Belt and Road Initiative on infrastructure in the Pacific, and I was like, holy cow, do our admirals understand what's going on? Because to deter these people, we have to be stronger than them. But if they're everywhere and they're stronger than us, deterrence isn't going to work, and that doesn't bode well for a peaceful world. And when you're talking about just pure power gains and an ideology like Marxism, clearly, obviously, communists are operating in that mode. That sets us up for
out in the open
catastrophe beyond even what we saw at the end of the Nazi regime in World War II, doesn't it?
It does. And if we remember that the globalists have had to play the long game and take on the strategy of the Fabian Socialist Group of gradualism or incrementalism, where they perform a long march through the institutions over more than 100 years, which they have successfully executed. The thing they lack that Napoleon didn't have, why he failed, Hitler failed, is the right technology. And so you need a whole high-tech control grid in order to completely control a society and control populist movements and dissenters and potential, the worst thing, populist leaders as they rise up and organize the people against the establishment, like Trump, like a J.D. Vance, like an Elon Musk. And so they have to be able to squash these people. Jack Ma is an excellent example of somebody that might have become a dangerous populist leader in China. And when he just said one thing out of line, semi-criticizing the communist leadership, he was disappeared for months and sent to a camp, and then they brought him back and put him back out on the street with a stern warning. And so once they have the control grid in place, they can just delete your bank account, no matter if you have billions. They can just erase your money. They can grab you at any time, throw you into a camp. You have no rights. And so the West and the globalists beta developed this in China. Have you ever wondered why we wanted to give them favored nation status when they had prison camps and no real elections? You're not supposed to give that to countries, but we sent all our manufacturing over there and gave them these favorable trade deals and trade deficits, which is basically us pumping hundreds of billions of dollars into their economy every year, and then at the same time having our state-of-the-art tech companies hand over the IP for advanced technology. Why would we do that? Well, only if there's an agenda, there's an objective. Well, what's the objective? They need money and they need technology so they can combine it together and then R&D and develop the societal high-tech control grid, which they have successfully done and rolled out. It is in place in China. They're beta testing it. And now they're packaging it up so they can franchise it for other smaller countries and eventually Western countries around the world. And if you listen to any of the globalist speeches the last 10 years, they all fantasize about how great China's system of government is, and if we could only have that here. And these are, CEOs, owners of giant top 10 companies, Fortune 100 companies, and global leaders of Western countries salivating over the Chinese control grid system that they want for us, including central bank currencies.
Yeah, it's the Chinese started with what's called a digital social credit system. You go to a vending machine, and if they've scored you down because you're a bad person, you've said something wrong, you can't even get a Coca-Cola out of a vending machine because of this social credit system. one of the add-ons to that was going to be the digital vaccine passport. I'm on the Stop Vaccine Passports Task Force that was set up by the Committee on Present-Danger China during the pandemic because of that very reason. It was an attempt to bring the Chinese social credit system and everything that goes with it into Western countries like the United States, and Israel fully adopted something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
it's very dangerous. And now we have artificial intelligence added on to that. And look, I'm a programmer, old school programmer from back in the early 80s. I don't believe that artificial intelligence will ever be sentient. It's just a very well put together, high speed, high memory level, large capacity computer programs. So garbage in, garbage out still applies. And we can use it, but we have to use it as a tool, not to become some panacea and buy into this. Well, it's going to become sentient someday. Well, that's baloney. It's not. But how do we cure this? So, while at the same time, we're monitoring and fielding these new technologies that should be for the good of mankind. As we've come through history, that's what we've tried to do. Obviously, some of these technologies have been turned against humanity many times. So what's the cure for these woke mind viruses, I guess, is my big question. And then how can we handle or manage this AI rollout? Because it's happening. I don't think you can stop it.
No. I mean, we are in the midst of another huge industrial revolution and enlightenment period when it comes to the advancement of technology and philosophy and ideas and arts and all of these things. We're in an enlightenment period now. And so it's not going to be stopped. It shouldn't be stopped. Mankind is going to, transcend to the next level. And that's a good thing. But the globalists and the Marxists want to take these tools, these inventions, and use them for evil to finally implement their crisis and then their revolution and bring in their world government that they've been working so hard for generations. And that must be stopped. So what's the cure? Well, there's really two cures. The first one is three words, very simple: massive institutional reform. Massive institutional reform, comprehensive, where you come in, everyone gets educated, gets up to speed on, and learns what's going on, who we're up against, what to do. That's a big part of the book, is to fast track people so they can understand what we're up against and take action. The second part is reclamation, where we reclaim our institutions, our companies, our business, schools, churches, denominations, what have you, and our government. So when we won the 2024 election, that's not necessarily a revolution because we didn't get rid of the U.S. government. It's a reclamation where we're taking back the government that was ours in the first place. It had been stolen from us, and we're reclaiming it. The third phase we're in now, in the U.S. and other countries need to go through these steps all over the West. All of the 60-some Western countries need to go through this process, this pattern. The third part is reform, where the executive actions, the leaders are replaced, the management levels replaced, and then the reforms happen, and they chop government down to size. They defund globalism. They defund the corruption. And then that leads to the fourth phase, which is redress of grievances. That's where the Justice Department and the prosecutors go after all the crimes that have been exposed, investigate and prosecute. But I'll tell you this, a massive institutional reform will only do part of the battle. The other thing that has to happen is a spiritual awakening and a renewal of Christianity around the West, and the reform of the churches and the denominations into that new movement. That's the other part. Our culture, the core of our culture is our belief in God. That's the core of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and Western civilization. It's a Christian civilization, and we've gone secular, and that could be a good thing and a bad thing because you can lose superstition and bad traditions. But you have to return to the core beating heart of what drives your society and your civilization, and that is Christianity and the salvation experience that was made available on the cross. And so that other part, I don't know how that's going to happen, but that next part has to happen. It's happened in every single time we've overcome a powerful establishment throughout our Western history.
Well, I think God has worked well so far. He's working with us. He's saved Donald Trump. Donald Trump believes that. Elon Musk, I think, is turning towards Christianity. J.D. Vance has, and they are supported by massive numbers of Christians. And you're absolutely right, TS. Thank you so much for joining us today. You can find his book at ts.com, on Amazon. Go get it. It's very important. It's the only one that pulls it all together. All right, so today's Truth Thursday. Monday is More Monday. My guest is our regular guest, Colonel John Mills. I've got to talk to him about what's going on in South Korea because we're not paying attention to it. And it's a lot of things happening. Most of it is not good. I'll see you then on the Rob Maness Show.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House. You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Slingshot TV. I am your host, Troy Smith. I'm so glad to be with you today because today is a very special episode. I don't get a chance on here to talk much about where I come from because we're talking about the news so often. But in my journey, there's been one man that's done more to help me grow as a professional than any other person that I know. This next guest of mine, I met him through a mutual friend, Michelle Terrace, a great woman, back in 2023. And I don't think there's been a day that's gone by since then that I haven't spoken to him. He's really important to me. I believe he's the most accomplished political consultant in the history of the United States of America. To my knowledge, there's no individual that has participated in more successful presidential campaigns. And there's nobody that I respect more professionally, politically, and all. I welcome onto the show now my hero, my good friend, Roger Stone. Sir, welcome to Slingshot TV for the first time. It's an honor to have you.
Troy, first of all, let me congratulate you for the tremendous success of Slingshot TV. We're very proud of the fact that you're an alumni of the Stone Zone. Who knows, you might be back there soon. And I've always enjoyed working with you because you may be the hardest working man in investigative journalism. And you are always very careful to get the facts exactly right. So it's a great honor for me to be here. A lot of political news to talk about. And I feel like I'm back home. I feel like I'm back in the saddle. So let's get into it.
Let's do it, Roger. You know, we had so many great episodes there on the Stone Zone. And one of the things we talked about time and time again is the political realignment that's occurred in America under President Donald Trump. This is a historic alignment, but as we've gone into this presidency, we've seen pushback from Republicans in the House and Senate on that MAGA agenda. And I think the result is this boiling over that's happening in the Republican base and the Democrat base. We got news just yesterday, Roger, that the Democrats have taken a state Senate seat in Pennsylvania. We have a headline to put up on this. A Democrat, James Malone, has won a PA Senate race in a plus 15 Trump district. And many people are pointing to this, Roger, saying there's a possibility that this is leaning towards a Democrat takeover in 2026. I want to get your thoughts on this because is this just something that's happened in the ether here? Is this something that is an indicator? What's your read on what's going on in this Pennsylvania Senate race?
Boy, I think what we have here is a situation in which we are the victims of our own success. So, in these special elections, this one in particular, but evidently from what I read, also true in the Florida district, I think it's number 6, Mike Waltz's seat. Democrats are highly energized. That's because they are angry that Donald Trump is executing and enacting his America First agenda. You see, they like open borders. They like DEI policies. They like men playing in girls' sports. They have no plan for the economy or for affordable housing. They really don't want America to be first. They're furious, particularly because, as he promised, President Trump, working with Elon Musk, is looking into the waste, fraud, and corruption in federal spending. And Troy, they're not finding millions, they're not finding billions, they're literally finding trillions. Ridiculous things. I mean, people who are 160 years old cashing a Social Security check. That's our money. Democrats, therefore, are very highly energized because they hate Trump. It's an anti-Trump vote. Republicans, on the other hand, are very happy right now, so happy that they are complacent. In their view, everything's fixed. We elected Donald Trump. They don't realize that this fight is ongoing. So in these special elections, there's a greater intensity for turnout among Democrats than there is among Republicans. And I think that's what explains this special election in Pennsylvania. I think it's what potentially is a problem in the Florida special election. And I think it's the principal reason why the decision was made today by the president to withdraw the nomination of Elise Stefanik for the UN ambassador position, because her seat in upstate New York, which is a fairly reliable Republican district, would be at risk under these circumstances. The mistakes that I think some political analysts make is taking today's dynamics and say, well, this shows that the Democrats will win back the House in 2026. That's light years from now in political terms. You can't really read, pardon me, you can't read anything into it. This is about the dynamics of right now.
Absolutely, Roger. And I think that's a very fair point. And there's another aspect to this. You mentioned that Florida 6 race. We have a headline that we can put up on that. GOP leaders raise alarm bells over a Florida special election. And this is supposed to be a district that's deep red, and it's turning out to be a lot more difficult for Republicans than they expected. We saw the withdrawal. You talked about the withdrawal of Elise Stefanik from the UN ambassadorship position. It appears that this Mike Waltz going up to the White House is going to have perhaps an effect in a House of Representatives, Roger, that's just 1 or 2 seats away. I'd like you to talk about, just for a second, the Democrats are really playing for this House of Representatives. And I wanted you to speak to the idea, when Republicans have the House of Representatives, we don't see movement on any of the key issues that Republicans vote for. But yet the Democrats, when they have control, they pass $10 trillion spending bills, bill after bill after bill. Why do the Democrats seem to understand the power of the House?
Ideologically monolithic. They're all Marxists, and therefore they're all on board for the Marxist agenda. Whereas the Republican caucus is somewhat more diverse. We have your establishment Republicans. They're really only interested in getting reelected and getting a paycheck, raising more money, getting reelected, and getting another paycheck. That's all they really want. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to bring fundamental change like Donald Trump. They give lip service to their support for Trump because Trump is extraordinarily popular in the base, and he's, in most cases, more popular than they are in their own district. So they give lip service to the agenda, but they're not willing to go fight for the agenda. And then on the other hand, you have the firebrands in the House, people like Tim Burchett and Eric Burleson and Anna Paulina Luna and Todd Paul Gosar and others, people who are fighters, people who realize that the reason they went to Washington is to fight for fundamental reform. And if you're the Speaker, Mike Johnson, who I think is a good man, trying to do a good job, you have to get a majority of the vote for anything. So let's take, for example, Oh, I don't know. How about the impeachment of Joe Biden? I mean, we have from the House Oversight Committee, we have hard evidence that members of the Biden family and Biden himself took millions of dollars from Russia, China, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Romania, so on. There's more than enough evidence there to impeach Joe Biden, to vote articles of impeachment, but I'm not sure that had the speaker wanted to do that before the election, that he could have gotten the necessary votes. And then you look at this situation where we have this incredible judicial overreach, where we have federal judges who are acting well beyond their legal authority, essentially usurping the executive authority of President Trump, saying, well, for example, no, Trump cannot deport dangerous illegal terrorists and criminals. Well, of course he can. He has that executive authority, but a judge in D.C. says he doesn't. Now you go to the appeals court, and of course, they uphold the lower court judge because it's D.C. I mean, this is the same court that upheld essentially the unconstitutional gag order against me when I was standing trial in the Russian collusion hoax in that same jurisdiction. So in D.C., just to be clear, the law, the facts, the evidence, the Constitution, the rules, none of these things matter. What matters is the agenda of the radical left and the politicized judges in that jurisdiction. So everybody says, oh, impeach these judges, impeach these judges. Well, that requires a majority in the House and then 2/3 of the Senate, which is a high barrier indeed. And technically, you can't impeach a judge because you disagree with their rulings, no matter how unconstitutional or crazy their rulings may be. You can only impeach a judge for malfeasance, for criminal activity, or some other high crime and misdemeanor. So theoretically, you can't impeach a judge because you don't like their decisions.
Well, and I think that is a good point, Roger. You know, we talk a lot about the federal judges and we talk about the idea that these people need to be removed. But, you know, to me, the judges are more of a story of the betrayal of these rhino Republicans in the Senate, because it was under Mitch McConnell that they worked with the Biden administration and Chuck Schumer to confirm hundreds of judges. I believe the count is 238, Roger. So during Biden's last term, the same senators that we're going to cover in our show tomorrow, John Cornyn and Mitch McConnell and all these people are really coming out and during the Biden administration were approving these judges who are now assaulting President Trump's ability to uphold the rule of law. I know that you talked about field hearings, and I thought that was so interesting, the idea that we can move some of these cases that are being held in D.C. where you can't get a fair trial and have them outside of D.C. in whatever jurisdiction that the person is actually from. I think that's a much more fair system, although that's not really related to the exact rulings that we're talking about. But there's one quick point I wanted to make and ask you about on the Senator Randy Fine and Florida's 6th District. Republican Governor Ron DeSantis has been telling people, Roger, for years that he created a solid red Florida where there's not any question as to whether Republicans will dominate in the future. He's called it the new Texas. He's called it all sorts of things. This race highlights that this red wall that Ron DeSantis brags about, it's not real, is it?
Well, I mean, first of all, this district is not as solidly red as the 1st district. That's the one that was represented by Matt Gaetz and Jimmy Patronis, who is the state CFO. I think will win that election handily. Randy Fine is controversial. Remember, he was originally a supporter of Ron DeSantis, and then he switched to support Donald Trump. That made Ron DeSantis, as I recall, very angry. This is not as Republican a district. It is a nominally Republican district. Walz could easily get reelected there. He could get reelected there tomorrow if he wanted to, but he left the seat to become the national security advisor. Look, it's not over until it's over, and we don't know what happens this weekend. Does the president drop in on his way to Mar-a-Lago? Maybe he drops in, and that would make a difference. This is not a question of not enough votes to win. The Republican votes exist in the district to win. It's a question of how do you motivate them to turn out in a special election? If a Democrat wins this seat in the special, they will lose the seat in the next November election when we have a normal turnout. But we can't really risk that. I think two things, Troy. First of all, I think the House made an egregious mistake in the case of Florida's 14th district. Now, in the 14th district of Florida, former Navy Commander Rocky Rockford challenged Kathy Castor, who's the daughter of a former congresswoman. And Rockford ran a very good campaign, and I think Rockford actually won. The problem was that the election board officials counted, I think it was 53,000 mail-in votes from voters that when you go check their registration card, they have no birth date and they have no social security number, meaning they're not legal. Once Rockford figured this out, he challenged it in the appropriate place to challenge it. That's in the U.S. House of Representatives Administration Committee. That is where elections should properly be challenged for the House. It's important to recognize that the House itself is the final arbiter of who has won an election. The House decides who has been duly elected and properly elected. And therefore, the House Administration Committee, once they analyzed the evidence, which Rockford supplied, could have unseated Castor and could have seated Rockford, which is what they should have done. Unfortunately, 3 weeks ago, roughly, the House Administration Committee, on a technicality, rejected Rockford's claim, saying that he hadn't brought it by a certain deadline set by the state, a deadline that the state never actually announced. It was a bogus, gutless decision, and they'd have one more seat right now if they had seated the guy who really won the election.
Well, that's putting it very plainly. Before we get off of this topic of Florida, Roger, one thing I wanted to bring up and this is the speculation about the governor's race. Byron Donalds has been convinced to run, I would say, by President Donald Trump. Trump puts out a statement just a few days later. Donalds announces he's running for governor. And she hasn't formally announced, but there's growing speculation. I've received tips in the last couple days that an announcement is imminent that Casey DeSantis is going to announce for governor of Florida in 2026. Now, I'm interested to get your thoughts how this race is going to shake out, because this really is a battle between Trump and DeSantis in Florida for the governor's mansion, something that I see heating up. Ron DeSantis having press conferences almost every single day, a lot of times including his wife. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you have to go back and look at my feed on X and some of the shows we did on the Stone Zone. I have been predicting for over 2 years that Casey DeSantis, who has no particular qualification to be governor, would seek to succeed her husband. This is really about Ron DeSantis's 2028 presidential aspirations. You see, if the DeSanti do not control the governorship, well, then they can't raise money. Nobody gives to Ron DeSantis because they like him. He's not very likable. People give to him because they have to, because he's the governor, and therefore he raised tens of millions of dollars from special interests. Let's recognize this is a man who spent $300 million. Some of that money was anti-Trump money, neocon money. The rest of it was special interest money. And he did not score, to say the least. So this is about nursing his fantasy about running again in 2028. Personally, I think that that will be about as successful as it was last time, which is to say not. However, in this case, Casey DeSantis has high name ID. And we presume her husband would campaign for her. It's interesting that Ron and Casey DeSantis were flying to Washington, D.C. to meet the president, I'm told, to try to persuade him to remain neutral in the primary. And while they were in the air, President Trump dropped an endorsement of Byron Donalds from Naples, Florida. So I think the president's position is pretty clear. I think that if this becomes a proxy fight, the the president will win. The president is more popular in Florida than Ron DeSantis, and there's still some very substantial hangover among MAGA activists and voters that Ron DeSantis, as you know, owes his governorship to Donald Trump. That DeSantis, as you recall, was running at about 8% in the polls. He was having trouble raising money. The Republican Party establishment had endorsed Adam Putnam, the state agriculture commissioner, who's also a former congressman. I think he had every one of the 67 counties, I believe it is. He had every Republican county chairman, every Republican state legislator in the Senate and the House, the Senate president, the Speaker of the House, every member of the Republican congressional delegation, with the exception of Matt Gaetz, and Donald Trump, unaware of the fact that DeSantis had actually refused to endorse Trump in 2016. When they were both on the ticket. Ron was running for re-election, having won in 2014, would not endorse Trump in that general election, which turned out to be a mistake because Trump ran stronger in DeSantis' district than DeSantis did. But Trump didn't know that. Trump's first contact, his first awareness of DeSantis comes when DeSantis sees the opportunity posed by the Russian collusion hoax and emerges as a defender of Donald Trump on Fox and on conservative media and conservative radio and so on. So Trump's first initial impression of DeSantis is very positive. Then my friend Matt Gaetz, who has a great new show, by the way, at OAN, convinced the governor to endorse DeSantis in the primary, and the rest is history. DeSantis skyrockets ahead of Putnam, proving how strong he is still in the Republican Party here in Florida. And then, as you know, once DeSantis is nominated, since he has scant knowledge of state issues, he had been planning to run for the U.S. Senate. Trump had to change his schedule to come to Florida 3 times to literally drag DeSantis over the finish line. So where is the loyalty? Where is the gratitude? Instead, DeSantis bought into the fake news narrative that President Donald Trump was a spent force, that he would probably be in jail, that he couldn't be nominated again, that he couldn't win a general election again. Of course, all that turned out to be wrong. To think that the governor never sustained any damage from that would be incorrect. I also think that, in all honesty, pardon me, DeSantis had an opportunity to fix this. Once he was vanquished for the nomination, if he had campaigned vigorously for Donald Trump, he would have repositioned himself. But other than speaking to the convention, which Trump graciously let him do, and saying one line, we need to replace Joe Biden with Donald Trump, that was his endorsement. There was never any full-throated endorsement. DeSantis never appeared at any rally for Trump. He didn't appear in the Florida rallies for Trump. So when Trump, for example, was at Doral, I was there, but Ron DeSantis was not there. I think he would have been much smarter to put his back into the campaign to reelect Trump, but perhaps DeSantis misread the general election the same way he misread the nomination phase and thought that Trump was not going to win.
Well, that was a really, just the fact that he decided to challenge Trump in 2024, Roger, I think that turned so many people off. And now that he's attempting to appeal, and this is the kicker for me, he doesn't seem to understand that his supporters support Trump first. And there's all kind of indicators to that we've had, and just this ego fight with DeSantis. I think it really is an internal battle with him, that he wants to be more relevant than Trump, and he really can't stand the idea that you just pointed out. It's 100% true that without Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis would have never done anything. He was struggling in the polls. He had nothing. Roger, I know one of the main reasons you came here today is because you were a front runner. I mean, you were really the first guy to put together a comprehensive book to tell us exactly what happened in the assassination of JFK. You were years ahead of everybody else now kind of picking up where you left us with your book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. I recommend to my audience, everybody pick up that book because it's simply so important. And I think people will be shocked to read, Roger. Many of the things that you discuss in this book at detail that you conducted your own investigations into, that's what's being released now. So I want to get your reaction as the man who wrote this book, penned this classic that really illustrates what happened in the assassination of JFK. What was your reaction when you saw that Trump had declassified thousands of documents related to JFK? And do you think it's a substantive release?
Positive. Remember that the Congress passed the JFK Assassination Records Act back in 1994, which actually mandated that these documents be released in 2017. President Trump ordered a limited number of documents released, but in the end, as we know, CIA Director Mike Pompeo persuaded the president not to release the most sensitive documents. That in itself, of course, is suspicious. Why would he do that? Well, he told the president that release of the JFK documents would expose the methods and sources of the CIA. Well, first of all, this was over 60 years ago, so their sources are all dead. Pardon me, and their methods, well, if the CIA was involved in trying to kill an American president, then I would say we need to know that. I must tell you, sadly, I think the president acted in good faith, but really his order was to release those documents in the JFK Assassination Records collection that is maintained by the National Archives. But that assumes that everything relevant, everything important, everything revelatory is in that collection, which of course it isn't. So we know that there are a number of things missing, things that were reviewed by the Assassination Records Review Board, which was set up by the federal government in the 90s after Oliver Stone's classic movie JFK, and more Americans became dissatisfied with the fake narrative that Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone nut communist, Russian communist, shot and killed John Kennedy with 3 shots, all fired from behind, none of which, of course, is true. So just to give you several examples. We know that the House Select Committee on Assassinations ruled in the 70s in their final report after an exhaustive investigation that organized crime was deeply